Brock and Bodie Thoene have thrilled millions of their readers with novels like the Zion Chronicles. Now they've teamed up with Pastor Ray Bentley from Maranatha Chapel in San Diego, California, for a new book called On the Mountain of the Lord. Recently, I talked with Pastor Bentley overlooking the city of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. Pastor Ray Bentley, great to be with you here in Jerusalem.
It is great to be with you, Chris.
With an amazing view behind us and the city of Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives. You've written a book called On the Mountain of the Lord. What's the book about?
Just recently, in the last couple of years, had a divine appointment where I met Bodie and her husband Brock Thoene, and they have written these series like the Zion Chronicles series, and all about historical novels, all the way from the first century through the rebirth of Israel. And I met her and I was like, wow, I've read your books. This is awesome. How amazing. And after I met her, I was studying and getting ready for a sermon, and I felt God speak to me and say, why don't you ask Bodie if she would write a story with you? Where I would kind of do the prophetic background, she would write the story. And so I called her up very nervous and said, I don't know if you would ever think of this, but would you prayerfully consider maybe doing a book with me? And she stopped. She said, well, I've never done this before, but Brock and I will pray about it. They prayed about it and came back and said, the Lord told us to do it. So it's a modern story about modern Israel and how prophecy is coming together. And there's a main character that, I don't want to give away and give a spoiler, but he was a believer, and some tragedy happens in his life where he loses his faith in God and the Bible, and he gets tied into this whole thing of counseling peace for the Middle East and for Jerusalem in particular. And this guy he doesn't believe in God anymore, and he goes, I don't believe in old men with beards walking through the desert and that they've got solutions to modern problems, But he comes to Jerusalem, has a series of miraculous divine interventions, gets caught up into it, has this epiphany, this moment where he's like, oh my gosh, it's all happening. And I think people around the world right now are having that same kind of, uh-oh, what's going on? When Israel became a nation, that got us going. When 1967 Jerusalem was conquered, that got us going. But then decades happen. It's been 50 years even since then. And now all of a sudden it's back again, and it's moving the pieces forward to pointing to the return of Jesus Christ.
Without giving too much away, what do you want people to take away from the book when they read it?
Well, so the book title is On the Mountain of the Lord. And one of the things that I didn't know for a long time, and many Christians I don't think are aware, is that the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve started in paradise, beauty and everything, and walked with God in the cool of the evening, the Garden of Eden was on top of a mountain. And when sin came and when Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden, essentially they had to go down the mountain to the howling wilderness and the curse and thorns and thistles. And so the story of redemption in the Bible is how God came down from the top of the mountain, and through the incarnation, he walked out into the wilderness and out into the thorns and thistles of the curse of this world. He grabbed Adam with one hand and Eve with another hand, and he walked us back up to the top of the mountain, back into the garden, back into fellowship with God. And I think that's why so many of the stories of the Bible happen on mountains. Mount Sinai, the giving of the Ten Commandments, and Mount Carmel, and Elijah with fire, and even Jesus' most famous sermon was called the Sermon on the Mountain. And of course, that's where the temple was. That's where the Lord is coming back through the Eastern Gate. It's all about that mountain that's right there behind us. And I think when people read this story, they're going to understand all the Psalms and the prophecies that talk about the mountain of the Lord.
And you want to reach a new generation, is that right? Millennials?
Yes. I kind of grew up with this, hearing about prophecy in Israel, and the next generation, I think they've kind of not really heard it, or they've lost it a little bit. I want to take the millennial that says, what is this about the Bible and prophecy and end times? What does that have to do with me? I want to take them on a journey. I'm going to take them on a story. And by the end of that story, I think their eyebrows are going to be raised and they're going to be going, oh my gosh, could I be actually living in the generation when Jesus Christ is actually coming soon? And that's what he prophesied. Chris, in Matthew 24, he said the parable of the fig tree, when you see the fig tree blossom, which is Israel, everything happening with Israel, Jews from around the world coming back into the city, and the focus being on Jerusalem, you know what Jesus said? When you see that, the generation that sees that, he said, I'm at the door. We don't have very much time. It's time to get right and get right with God and wake up and, you know, smell the coffee and be prepared for what God is about to do.
Look forward to the book. When does it come out?
It is coming out July 31st. You can pre-order it on Amazon. And it's called On the Mountain of the Lord, Ray Bentley and Bodie Thoene.
Great to be with you, Ray.
Thank you, Chris.